if it was down to me and we had the choice of being in the Conference League or finishing one place below, I'd rather finish one place below because we think we would lose money. In my view, there's no PSR pressures on Forest to sell. If there's a clause in his contract which says
Hi guys, and welcome back to a special episode where now that Forest have qualified for Champions League, we had to get the guru, the best finance expert out there, Kieran Maguire, to talk us through what to expect. For some of you, you may have never seen Europe, you're too young, maybe like me, or for the rest of you, you've seen the glory days of the two stars, and some of us just about saw Frank Clark taking Forest into Europe. But we're going to figure all this out with Kieran, what it means for Forest from a financial perspective. And is Conference going to bring in any money for Forest, or is it going to be Champions League missing out has cost us a lot? So make sure you've liked and subscribed. And Kieran, many, many thanks as always. Always so generous with your time, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. It's been clearly a bad evening in Liverpool. Bad day,
Yes.
terrible events. I've just been checking in on my friends who are Liverpool fans who were at the event, but everybody's okay, and you just send your love out to everybody that's been injured
100%.
and attacked. But yeah, it's okay. Bit wobbly, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, horrific to see, and just spoiled what should have been a celebration for the city. And we wish everyone well, and hope that everyone's okay, mate. So I'm glad you and your mates and everyone is good to hear, buddy. And yeah, on the footballing side, you guys nearly made it. We kind of could have helped you as well if we'd beaten Chelsea, and you guys could have been in the conference. So you happy with Brighton's season overall? Because you finished very strong.
New manager, second highest finish in the club's history. FA Cup quarterfinals. That's not too shabby for a small provincial side. I think some people are disappointed due to the fact that Palace won the FA Cup, but Palace won the FA Cup because they deserved to. They were very good against Fulham, against Villa in the semi-final, where I thought they were superb, and against City. So sometimes you just got to go and take your hat off and say well done, and you look forward to the next season.
Very gracious of you. I don't know if I'd be saying that if it was Derby. So you guys have got your rivalry with them, mate. But on our front, mate, it was looking good for Champions League, and then we had 3 chances to get it over the line. Newcastle didn't want to win. Villa didn't want to win. And then, of course, we didn't want to win yesterday. So we're ending up in conference now. And I just want to kind of start with this, Kieran, just to start to get an understanding of the finance side of it, because we know there's big money when it comes to Champions League. And we get told that the money when it comes to Europa is a hell of a lot less, and then even less when it goes down. I think 2.5 billion in Champions League is the total pot, and then it comes down into the hundreds of millions. But if I could get it from you, what is the breakdown, and just how much have Forest potentially missed out, if you can use that phrase after the season we've had, by missing out on Champions League?
Well, if Forest had got to the Champions League, you effectively get an entry fee of around about 30 million euro. Then what happens is that all 36 teams who are in the Swiss model, they are ranked between 1 and 36 on the basis of their European history in the last 5 to 10 years. So I've got to be honest, Forest will be towards the bottom of that. And it works out that you get 1 million euros per place, roughly. So therefore, somebody like Real Madrid would get 36 million, and the clubs. But even so, €1 million, or it could be if you've got 2 clubs that are equal in terms of their European performance, it goes on the performance of the country. So Forest wouldn't have been bottom out of the 36. But I think we could probably add, say, 4 to 5 million euro there. You get 2 million euro for a win in the group stage, and you've got 8 games. You get 700,000 for a draw. So yeah, even a modest performance, 3 wins, 2 draws, it adds up. So we're already up to around about um, you know 50 million, and then there's more money comes in because TNT have paid the most money for the
Yeah.
TV rights of any European country. You get another bonus from that. So you add that up, and realistically, I think that Forest would be looking at a minimum of 60 to 65 million euro for participation, which is probably around about a third of their income. And then if Forest get into the knockouts, more money, get into the last 16, last 8, that's when the numbers start to ramp up. And that's purely from the TV pot. And of course you've got guaranteed 4 matches at the City Ground. I don't know what Mr. Marinakis would be doing in terms of ticket prices, but we saw at Aston Villa that when they played Bayern Munich at Villa Park, they were charging £97 for a ticket. So, I think you've got an owner who doesn't need the money. So, I would have hoped from your point of view that the ticket prices would have been, fair. But even so, you're looking at you got 30,000 people turning up. Let's say they're paying an average of £40 a head. That's 1.25 million. So that's another 5 million. So all of these things start to add up. And as far as merchandise is concerned, you'll probably have a different patch. You'll have a different font, perhaps on the back of shirts. You'll have a different away shirt for your pick. All of these things start to add up. So let's say that Forest had got to the last 16 or the last 8, then I would say you're probably looking at a minimum of 75 million and perhaps a wee bit more in terms of the money coming in. Now, the players are on bonuses. You've got the cost of hosting games when you go to away matches. You've got to charter flights and all of these cost. But even so, the club's making a huge amount of money. So it would have been a really good opportunity, and it would have been an opportunity, I think, for Forest to reinvest in the squad. Another downside is that because there are so many matches in Europe, I've got to be honest, you've got to invest more in the squad because you get into that routine of Saturday, Wednesday for practically the whole of the pre-Christmas period, because by the time you factor in a couple of Carabao Cup games, and appreciate it, I mean, you'll be entering the Carabao Cup at a later stage anyway, because Forest are in Europe, and that's to be celebrated. There's practically no weekends, or there's no midweek gaps, especially by the time you also add in international breaks and so on.
And in terms of like the attraction as well, is that something that, in terms of players that can come in? So obviously Champions League is where all the big boys want to play and what have you. Do you think Forest now have to maybe relook at recruitment that maybe 6-7 weeks ago they were thinking about it? Does the budgeting start to change in terms of how much we can do? Because would I be right in saying, even though that Champions League money, let's say it was 70 million, does that not come in till the end of the season because they're waiting, or is it paid as you go through?
No, you effectively get a deposit in exactly the same way that the Premier League pays clubs a deposit in over the course of the summer. So UEFA aren't stupid. They want clubs to be active in the transfer market. So that 30 million setup fee is probably about 70% of that would have come in over the course of the summer. And you might say, well, 20, 25 million doesn't go very far these days. But remember, transfers are paid in installments. Normally a minimum of 3 years. So 25 million means you can spend 75 million plus all of the additional money that Forest will have earned this season from finishing that much higher in the Premier League, because every place in the Premier League is worth 3.5 million as well. So, it's spreadsheet heaven for nerds like me, but the numbers do add up, and it would have made a very solid impact as far as Forest's finances were concerned.
Yeah, and if we now like compare that to the Conference League, let's skip the Europa because we didn't want that either yesterday. So if we compare that pot that you were talking about from the Champions League to the Conference, how do the two compare side by side?
Okay, I think we need to separate two things here. From a fan's point of view, it's going to be a fantastic experience for Forest fans.
Yeah,
Be absolutely brilliant. Celebrate it, love every moment, create the memories. I'm sounding like I'm name dropping here, but I'm not. I was out with a finance director of a Premier League club. They went to lunch, and we were talking about Europe. And the finance director turned to me and said, "I'll be honest. If we had the choice between, if it was down to me, and we had the choice of being in the Conference League or finishing one place below, I'd rather finish one place below because we think we would lose money." And the reason why he said that, or she, but it wasn't he, the reason why he said that was, for every £1 that you earn in the Conference League, you're earning 9 in the
wow,
in the Champions League. So
Champions League.
it's a very small fraction of the money. It's transformational if you are Shamrock Rovers, or if you're TNS in Wales, or you're in Albania. But for a Premier League club, you're probably going to lose money. I mean, he said the only benefit of being in the conference is that it gives you a greater chance of being in the Europa League in 26, 27. So,
Yeah,
Forest now they've got another bite of the cherry of European qualification next season. We've seen West Ham win the conference. I think there's a fair chance that Chelsea are going to win the conference this season. Although Real Betis are decent opponents, there's no
yeah,
doubt about that. But from a financial perspective, he says, you still need to invest in the squad, because the squad needs to be stronger, because it's now Sunday, Thursday, Sunday, Thursday. And I know when Brighton got into Europe last season, again, fantastic experience. I never thought I'd see Brighton in Europe.
yeah.
So Marseille, Athens, Amsterdam, and Rome. Yeah, I've only been to Amsterdam
Good
before,
nights out. Yeah,
and it was a very good night out, and it was very, very different to going to Ajax. I'll be honest, but it was they are lifelong memories. But from a playing point of view, you need a stronger squad. So by the time you factor in the additional investment in the squad, you're also going to struggle to maintain your position in the Premier League. Brighton dropped 5 places
yeah,
in the Premier League last season. Well, that's 15 million quid. That again wipes out the additional money. So the conference is absolutely brilliant. I really cannot stress this enough. It's an absolutely, because we should not be talking about football. We should be talking about last minute winners going,
yeah,
going to Albania on a Thursday night out, and you will create lifelong memories because we had to get 3 flights to get there, or we had to do this, or there was this crazy taxi driver, or there was an incident and it's always an incident in a nightclub, by the way. I can assure you, wherever you go, and you and your mates will be discussing that for years to come, and they will be fantastic memories. But financially, it's Premier League level. It's not great.
So what is the breakdown similar in terms of the structure? So does a win get you X amount of pounds, a draw get you X amount, and if you go through to the knockout stages and so on, and just obviously at a lower scale, a much lower scale.
Yeah, I think a win is about €230,000. And by the time you've paid player bonuses, you've paid to
Yeah,
go to the match, and so on, you actually realise that given that it's £3 million per, or £3.5 million, the difference between 14th and 13th in the Premier League,
yeah,
it's, on a net basis, it's not great. Yeah, if you get to the semi-final or the final, that's when that they reckon you're just about turning a profit if you're a Premier League club. Again, if you're from one of the smaller nations, you've got much lower wage bill, and it makes sense. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, because I'm all for as many countries and as many clubs in Europe participating in these competitions, but the conference is designed for non-Big Five countries.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's great. But if you are from one of the Big Five countries, and clearly Forest are, it's not financially beneficial.
Mm. And did this now throw Forest into UEFA's PSR regulations, or would they call it FFP there? Because I know with the Champions League and stuff that kicks in, but does that go all the way down to the conference as well?
It does. So they're called squad cost rules, and under UEFA's rules, Nottingham Forest will be allowed, and this is how sad my life is, 'cause I know these things off by heart. For every £100 that Forest make from ticket sales, from the broadcast deal, from commercial partners, and from player sales, and you pick the best player sales of the last 3 years, in effect. And so you take that as a total, and you cannot spend more than £70 on that. On player wages, so non-player wages are excluded. Agents' fees, transfer fees amortised. Let's not go there late on a Monday night.
Yeah.
And any player write-downs. So it's quite a complicated calculation. But if you break those rules, what UEFA tend to say is, we're just going to fine you, so that there won't be any football punishment as such.
Yeah.
I know Barcelona were about 200 million over the limit. Barcelona's a car crash for a football club, but they were given, a fine in the hundreds of thousands of euros. So for a first offence, things might get a bit more ramped up if you do it year in, year out. But it doesn't look like UEFA are going to be particularly Orwellian in terms of their punishments. It's not like the Premier League.
And is that the same kind of structure? Is that the same kind of structure where you have the rolling 3-year period that we would with PSR, or is that kind of closed off on a 12-month cycle when it comes to the European stuff?
No, it's done on a 12-month cycle, and it's done on a calendar year, as opposed to a season basis, which just makes things that much more complicated. So it's additional work for the staff at Forest and the other clubs. There is still, in addition to that, there's also the PSR equivalent, where you're allowed to lose €60 million over 3 years. So it used to be €30 million, but they've doubled that to 60 million. So ridiculously complicated rules. I can only assume that Seferin at UEFA has an investment in some firms of accountants and wants to keep them busy, because it's bonkers.
Yeah, because Villa as well this season, I was hearing, were like way over the limit, and potentially we're going to get some fines from it. So it is one where, I guess, as far as coming in for the first time since the mid-90s into Europe, even if we're breaking it, it's just going to be, here's a fine, pay it and move on kind of thing.
Yeah. You've got an owner who is independently very wealthy. So I don't think there's anything to worry about it from a cash point of view. It'll be more of it's more of an annoyance than anything else.
Yeah.
We saw Manchester United be fined by UEFA a couple of years ago, and so on, and nobody batted an eyelid. Wolves, when they got into Europe about 6 or 7 years ago, again they were fined. I think they were given a wage cap by UEFA or some sort of, but it was nothing that's going to stop the operational activities at Forest.
Cool. And in terms of the actual PSR stuff with Forest, because my feeling is, obviously just me speculating here, that Marinakis will see this as very important to him. He obviously won it with Olympiacos last year, and he will be, I assume, looking to invest quite heavily into the squad this summer. How is Forest PSR situation currently looking? Obviously, we had the breach when we had the whole Brennan Johnson thing after the first year. Then we saw this PSR party, as I called it, with Premier League clubs selling their youth players to each other. And 35 million here and 22 million there. Is there anything we need to worry about? Obviously, the numbers came out end of January, but the closing date is going to be 30th of June for this next period, which we won't see. But from the numbers and your feeling on things, how are Forest looking on PSR? Have we got another whole Nick DeMarco call to make this season, or we could?
Well, funnily enough, I was out for dinner. There was Nick, his partner, me and my partner. We were all out for dinner together on Friday nights. Nick's in good form. He's amazing. He's an amazing guy. One of the most fascinating blokes I've ever met in my life, as well as
QPR
being
fan,
super
isn't
smart.
he?
QPR fan,
QPR
ex QPR,
fan?
yeah. He used to be a doorman, and he put himself through law school whilst as a doorman at a nightclub. And he now is he is the GOAT. He is the number one sports lawyer who everybody wants to get hold of. No, he was. I don't think you'll be calling him because, again, this sounds like I'm sort of giving away too many state secrets here. I've actually written an article today for the BBC because I'm now sort of working for them on sort of doing football finance stories. And I've assessed all 20 clubs in terms of where I feel they are in terms of PSR. And I sort of rank them: 1, no troubles at all; 2, need to do a little bit of bit of trading; down to 4, where you need to get your act together. And I think I graded Forest as a 2.
I'll say that.
The initial issues which arose when Forest came into the Premier League and had to invest. Yeah, remember they were promoted with a squad costing £12 million. So they had to invest, and they did invest. That season now drops out of the equation because you're in season number 4 in 25-26. So yeah, I think Forest are okay. They can't spend regardless amounts of money. Some clubs could drop a £250 million and not have to sell anybody, and it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to them. But yeah, I think Forest are in a strong position, and they only need to improve a couple of positions as well. Whereas some of the clubs that you see getting promoted probably need 8 players of Premier League standard, and that becomes quite a challenging issue, as we've seen. We're given the rotation between the bottom of the Premier League and the top of the Championship.
And now we're clear as well, because we've got the 335 years because of the time we've been in the Premier League. That kind of loosens the belt a little bit as well, doesn't it, for us there? And I just want to ask on that player swapping, because we saw it with Elliot Anderson coming Forest way and then Vlachodimos going to Newcastle. The Premier League at that stage was saying it was noted. I haven't seen any follow-up on it. I don't think they liked it, but is that a loophole they've closed, or could clubs this summer potentially go down that road again?
UEFA have closed that loophole. What UEFA have said is that if there are players moving between 2 clubs in the same window, they don't take the actual sale price. They take the book value of the clubs, and that substantially reduces the profit. You take the book value as the sales price, so effectively they're sold on a no gain, no loss basis. So UEFA clearly are unhappy about it, but as far as the Premier League is concerned, Premier League clubs had the opportunity to tighten up the rules, and they effectively voted to maintain the status quo, i.e., there's an awful lot of Premier League clubs who see this as a bit of a get out of jail free card.
And
they quite like playing that card. And I don't have an issue with that whatsoever, because I think the PSR rules are really poorly drafted anyway. But when the Premier League then turn around and say, "Oh, by the way, we don't need an independent regulator because we're fantastic at making up our rules ourselves," it sort of shoots themselves in the foot. It's exactly the same with the women's team. That loopholes are being allowed to continue. If you've got any stray properties that are owned by Forest, again, you can sell those at a profit to yourself and book those for PSR purposes.
It's absolutely crazy. The talk is there's a lot of rumors going around about Gibbs-White being linked to Manchester City, for example, fees of 75 million, some banded 100 million around. In your estimation, and again, obviously we can't hold you to it, but I guess if I phrase the question like this, are Forest under any obligation to sell Gibbs-White at all? There's not the scenario we had with Brennan Johnson in your estimation, that if we want to keep him and he wants to stay, we're quite happy to do it from a financial perspective.
In my view, there's no PSR pressures on Forest to sell. If there's a clause in his contract which says if somebody offers X, then the player is entitled to talk to the person making the offer. That's a separate issue. But as you just said, yeah, if the player's happy at Forest, and I think he's brilliant, by the way, as a football fan, then there's no need to sell.
Okay, that's good news. Well, but we could use that to front a bigger summer spending budget in theory, couldn't we? So, like, I mean, do you think Forest could do another 100 mil this summer in terms of transfers, or would that be quite dependent on getting some players out to look to balance the books?
I think from a squad point of view, if you're going to bring in 3 players, then you can't have too bloated a squad. Yeah, we saw Guardiola only a few days ago threatening to leave Manchester City if he's given a squad of 24 players next season.
Yeah.
So I think from a practical point of view, it makes sense to allow players to move on to play elsewhere. If Forest spent 100 million on players this summer, let's say that they're signed on 5-year contracts, that means it's 20 million a year in amortization. I think Forest could probably absorb that, but you sell one player for 20 million, and especially if it's an academy player, it knocks off the that as an issue. So yeah, I think Forest could easily drop a 9-figure sum without being under undue pressure to sell. I just think from a practical point of view, you don't want. Yeah, I've got a great job. I teach professional footballers, including some at Forest, and for the PFA. And I think we as fans sometimes get a bit of a skewed view of footballers because of the way that they're portrayed in the media.
Yeah.
But from my observation, they just want to play football. They want to play football at the highest level. They want to play football every week. And I can assure you, none of them want to sit around picking up their, whatever it is, 50, 60 grand a week, kicking their heels in the reserves or not, or just going into training each week. So it's not in the interests of the player, and it's not in the interests of the club to hang on to players just for the sheer hell of it.
Yeah. I've got to ask you this because I'm still holding out hope. 115.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. Brighton fans that say the same to me as well.
That could impact you. Is this?
I know.
I mean, it took 5 minutes to charge Forest and then take our points off us. Same with Everton. I know they're not related. There's a whole different kind of world between the two, but they're kind of taking the mick a little, aren't they, Kieran? Is there any movement, any signs of it? There was talks early March was being rumored around, and now it's gone quite quiet on it.
It's gone very quiet. If you think that the hearing finished a week and a half before Christmas, and we are now almost in June, so therefore the commission has been spending 5 months reviewing the evidence. Now, it has to be said, there is a huge amount of evidence to review. Somebody told me 500,000 documents. That's I just wish I had shares in a photocopier company, and I'd be a millionaire. But so they're going to review it very carefully. I think the threshold for guilt is very, very high. If we look at the 3 broad issues, first of all, Manchester City have effectively been accused of fraud in the sense that they have disguised money from the owner, pretending it's sponsorship money. So if that is the case, the sponsors have to be guilty. Manchester City have to be guilty. And then you say, well, the auditors, what have they been doing? I'm not saying that they'd be party to this because they won't. Either they've been fooled or they've perhaps not checked enough documents. So, you've got to, if that is the case, then there has to be an awful lot of collaboration between different parties, and trying to prove that is difficult. Also, there's a further issue, is this is a football commission. So what happens if they call on somebody from Abu Dhabi to give evidence and that person turns around and says, yeah, can't be asked, or I don't think I want to. The second accusation is in terms of hiding costs. So, the accusation that was made was that Roberto Mancini was being paid £2 million a year by City to be the manager. That's before bonuses, has to be said. And also £2 million a year for doing 4 days coaching in Abu Dhabi. What happens if Roberto Mancini turns around and says, okay, I'm not going to get evidence. I've spoken to my lawyers and they say, it's nothing to do. I'm not involved in English football. Why should I give evidence? So therefore, how do you prove these things? It becomes very difficult. The third accusation is that Manchester City haven't cooperated with the Premier League. This is something which they were found guilty of by UEFA, and UEFA fined them €10 million. It's probably fair to say that Manchester City are most likely to be guilty of this because they have not particularly helped the Premier League. If you think about the differences between Forest and Everton, Forest were very cooperative with the Premier League investigation. Everton less so, and I think that was reflected in the severity of the tariffs given for the 2 different clubs. So that's where we are. I talk to lawyers and they say this will be incredibly well nailed down. There will be no leaks. All the parties are very professional. And then what's likely to happen, there'll be the 3 people on the commission who will be writing up their conclusions. There might be one other person involved who they might be using as a sounding board. So it'll be 3 or 4 people who know it. They will then write up their conclusion. That will be sent to the Premier League and Manchester City probably 24 hours before the announcement is made, just so that City's lawyers and the Premier League's lawyers can just go through it and say, can you just clarify what this means? Can you clarify what that means? And so on. So they'll be given a very short window of opportunity, again, because I don't want any leaks to go out. And then we'll find out whether Manchester City are guilty or not guilty. And then you might not find out. That will be the verdict. You won't necessarily find out the punishment at the same time. You might be waiting another couple of weeks because the commission now going and says, right, you're guilty of X, Y, and Z. We're now going to determine, we want time before we think we can come up with an appropriate punishment. So there's a lot of moving parts in this. And I appreciate from your point of view, you want to be ideally in the Europa League. Yeah. There's certainly vested interest. I do want to go to Albania on a Thursday night. It would be a dream come true. But I'm not convinced that it will take place quickly enough because Manchester City could appeal, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Guys, do you think there's any hope on that one? Let me know. I just want to ask just final thing from me about Marinakis, where he basically gave up power in quotes because of the potential conflict between Forest and Olympiacos being in the same tournament. That is now null and void, I believe, because Olympiacos, even if they don't make Champions League through the playoffs, will end up in Europa. Is Marinakis now able to rescind that and retake control over Forest, even though I know it's kind of paper talk, if you like? As in it's on paper, he's not in charge. But what is the kind of full details behind that? Because there's also talk that Palace with their owner have got it with Leon, and there's been some rumours saying that Palace may be demoted into the Conference League as well.
Yeah, I think the two things are different in the sense that Marinakis effectively is 100% ownership of Olympiacos and 100% ownership of Forest. So he has therefore transferred his shares to what it looks like a trust. He will have no involvement in the trust decisions. He will not be allowed to attend meetings of the trust. So there has to be, checks and balances in terms of how it's run. So as you say, it's a paper transaction because it can still provide funding for Forest. There's again absolutely nothing wrong with that. Manchester United and Nice have done it because Ratcliffe has an investment in the two of them. Again, Brighton with USG, the Belgian champions. Tony Bloom had to take his shareholding down to below 30%. I think Villa did the same with an investment in a Portuguese club. So it's something which happens.
Chelsea and Man City as well. Chelsea, Genoa, isn't it? I think it is. And
Strasbourg, is it as well?
Strasbourg with Chelsea,
yeah. City and Genoa. And the bizarre thing, I think isn't it at Genoa that the remaining shares are owned by a guy called Guardiola, who happens to be Pep's brother. So, and you go, okay, right, fair enough, mate. Yeah, I'll take it on the chin. Or it could be a different club. I don't know, but I know that City have got a party, or City Football Group got a party investment. So that's where we are. The Crystal Palace and Lyon situation is more complicated. John Textor, I'm conscious that this is being broadcast, so I'll choose my words carefully. John Textor has a lot of baggage. He's got a lot of complications in his life. I think the French football authorities aren't his biggest fans. And also at Palace, he owns 45% of the shares, but he's only got one vote, and the other three directors have one vote as well. Or the other three main shareholders have got one. So therefore he doesn't control Palace. So in my view, he doesn't need to sell his shares in Palace because the other three shareholders can gang up on him and vote against him. But I'm not a lawyer, so I think it's messy with Textor, but messy and Textor are words which you do see in the same sentence on quite a regular basis.
So is there a scenario that because I think they have a meeting on it or something mid-June, if they deem that he can't have or he is in control of both clubs, is there a chance that Crystal Palace get demoted to the Conference League and Forest get promoted up to the Europa League?
Yes, I mean it's a bit like my emails to Kylie Minogue asking her out for a date. She's not said no, so there is a chance. But if I'm honest, it's not a very good one.
I had to try, Kieran. I had to.
Absolutely, yeah. So I can't say 100%. Yeah, I can't say 100%, and you got no chance. But
it would be harsh on Palace if that happened, because Leon, I think their coefficient is higher where they finished, so they would get the priority, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
on that.
Yeah, that's goes. Yeah.
Oh, listen, I've taken up so much of your time, Kieran. It's been as ever so informative, and I'm leaving all of Kieran's links and social medias down in the description below. So make sure you go and listen, because his podcasts are the best. His humor is amazing. And of course, you have to follow him on social media because he does put a lot of Forest financial stuff up there, and it's always fascinating to see. So, Kieran, from me and the reviewers of FFTV, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. And you were a gentleman when we beat you 7-0. Unfortunately, we didn't bump into each other for me to buy you that drink that I owe you. But you were very gracious in defeat, so I thank you for that. And let's see what next season brings, mate.
Thanks so much for the invite on the show. And to all Forest fans, big love. You've had a fantastic season. Go and have a whale of a time in Europe next season and bring back the trophy.
Yep. We're getting silverware next season. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you've liked, make sure you're subscribed if you're new, and we'll see you on the next video. Come on, you Reds.